All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take, Sharp and Shapiro. Chris Wynn in studio guest today as well. That was a lively 90 minutes of radio. If you guys weren't aware, we do have a pretty big basketball tournament, 16 teams left in the tournament. So we're definitely going to get to that. And the guy we have with us on the line right now, he is a former National Coach of the Year. He is all-time top 60 in wins in D1 college basketball. And just a few years ago, the Mountain West Conference Coach of the Year over there at Colorado State. Happy to call him a friend, and certainly a friend of the show, Larry Eustachy, joining us. Coach, I appreciate you coming on. How are you?
I'm doing great. I want to hear about that first 90 minutes.
It's just me calling callers idiots and morons. Just the usual stuff. People attacking me, I attack them back. It's like a boxing match on the radio. It's always fun. I turn into a tomato, Larry, on this show. I turn red in the face, but I have fun doing it. Hey, you've been red in the face a few times. You've gone after officials in your career, so you know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. So basically, it was a normal 90 minutes for Brian.
That's exactly what it was. Just another typical day in the life of Brian.
Larry, I'm not going to lie to you. There weren't a lot of big Shat fans that were calling in either. They're not afraid to go toe to toe with them.
That's fine. That's fine. It's always a good time. There's I want to get to the NCAA tournament, Coach, but can you recall a time in your career in a game where you say to yourself, that's probably the most pissed off I have ever been in a basketball game, where you just lost complete control with the officials or whatever? Like, can you remember a moment in your career where you say to yourself, man, I just lost it?
Oh, absolutely. I go right to the game that we were playing to go to the Final Four against Michigan State, and Michigan State drove the baseline. Our player stepped over, and there was a collision. It's either a block or a charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
They called a double foul.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, my God. That never happens.
I asked Jerry Tarkanian, Coach, have you ever heard of a double foul in that situation? They went to a monitor. They did everything. A double foul. It's either a charge or a block. Now, you guys have seen a lot of basketball. Have you ever seen that situation called a double foul?
No, I mean, I double technicals happen all the time. I understand that.
Right.
But, the only time, Larry, and you tell me if you disagree, where I see a double foul is when a referee anticipates two guys are doing something to one another, and they don't want it to escalate, so they just stop play. No team has an advantage. You give two players a double foul. Just no team has an advantage. You just don't want something to escalate. I think that's the only time I've ever seen that.
Exactly. And this call really was the factor in us not going to the Final Four.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So I was obviously extremely upset, but there's still minutes to go, say 3, and we lost the lead. And so when the game was over, but not quite, I got 2 technicals. And by the way, that swung the spread, and I got a few phone calls on that one. 2 people lost money.
Oh, my God.
In the Elite 8 game. One guy wrote me a letter where he lost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh, my God.
If you follow me.
Oh, my God. Wait, so hold on.
Points they made.
Wait.
Switch the spread.
You're telling me that you just want to make it to a Final Four, and you're ticked off, which I understand. You get a double technical, so I believe that's 4 free throws. And you're telling me somebody wrote you a letter saying that, ticked off because they lost 6 figures because they bet on you guys?
$800,000.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable! Oh my God, that is the craziest gambling story I've ever. That's unbelievable. Chris, go ahead.
So, Coach, you bring up emotions and being a head coach. Of course, a story broke last week regarding the Big Ten tournament. You mentioned Michigan State as well too. Tom Izzo catching some heat, right, with his reaction and the way that things went down with one of his players. We all remembered that follow college basketball, of course, the reaction with Bobby Knight and the player there, where he got into basically a physical with a player there. Do you think that there is, Coach, this kind of wussification of society that's really kicked in here in 2019 with respect to players and coaches and how things are being done? Because those of us, I mean, not to date myself, but I went to college back in the early 90s and went to high school in the 80s, and it didn't seem like this was an
Chris
issue
is
that
50.
this issue didn't really come about up until, maybe the last 10, 15 years. And then all of a sudden now people are all up in arms. And I'm not talking about necessarily just that incident with Bobby Knight. I'm talking about just, being tough on players and, and having a approach as a coach that isn't necessarily, isn't necessarily going to be coddling or babying players.
I think I was in college when that question started. Anyway, Larry, go ahead.
But
I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Larry.
Well, you're talking to the king of that topic, and with that said, I think it's changed drastically. I would say in the last 5, 6, 7 years. I think I was listening to a guy the other day, and he made a great comment. Victims are raising victims, and I really believe that. I think these parents are way overboard. It carries over, and you have these issues. And I get Tom Izzo. He probably, you're coaching. I'll tell you what Tom Izzo did. Mike Krzyzewski does every day in practice. Some guys can not carry it into the game, and some guys choose to be themselves the whole time. And it's happening everywhere what Tom Izzo did. He just happens to be true to himself and does what he does at any situation. And I think the game amps a coach up more, a guy like Tom Izzo. He's extremely competitive, and I understand it. But the line is continuing to move, and I'll ask you guys that. The needle keeps moving. What is it? What is crossing the line?
It's to the point where
closer.
A tough glare is a real issue.
Which is a joke. Here's where I think cross the lines, Coach, and I'm sure you would agree with me on this one. Just don't put your hands on a player. Don't do what Bobby Knight did. Don't strangle somebody.
I would say this. I would say excessive physical. Because there's times when coaches will put your arm around somebody, or you'll just grab him by the shoulder, something like that, right? That's
Bobby
not
Knight,
something that I don't think it should be even addressed.
He ruined that kid's life. He ruined that guy's life.
Yeah.
I mean, straight up.
Don't threaten a kid.
No.
Yeah.
I don't care what you call him. Everyone motivates differently, and I think it was you that said this, Coach, to me once, and I couldn't agree with you more. At times, and I think some of the best coaches around do this. You don't want to let your kids to always be comfortable. You want them to be just a little bit uncomfortable, so that you can get 110% of them. Now, maybe that doesn't work with everybody, right? But I think it works with a lot of kids. You want them to be a little bit uncomfortable so that they can be held accountable, and they know it.
And they're not just kids; they're young men.
Right?
They're still growing and developing.
Yeah. Would you agree with that, Larry?
Yeah, I would. And these parents will say, and first of all, back up to Tom. Tom tells these guys and these players and their parents exactly what to expect. If you're going to come into this program, these kids go on to Michigan State's campus on the visit. The older players say, hey, this is exactly how it's going to be. And you know what? It sounds great until you're in practice and doing something that you've never been asked to do, which is sweat and actually get tired and be physical. And then they have amnesia. They don't remember that they were reminded that it's going to be this hard. And that's where the coach has the conflict with maybe their athletic director, their presidents, that I tell them exactly what to expect. It's just they say they're tough enough, they say they can do it, but they're really not. And you have to get players in uncomfortable situations. Now, not choking them,
right?
Not hitting them with a chair, but urging them on
right.
in the right way, and actually make the practices more difficult in the game. And then you have if the talent is somewhat equal, you're going to beat the teams that you play.
All right, so UCF is up 77-76 yesterday. Zion Williamson has the ball. He's driving down the lane. He knocks over somebody. Clearly, Taco Fall follows him. He misses the free throw. R.J. Barrett pushes the guy in the back. Why did all that stuff get thrown under the rug? Why was the whistle not called in that game?
Well, who was the coach of the winning team?
There you go. Yeah, there you go, Larry. I mean, but I agree with JD. You know, at the last couple minutes of that game was disgraceful from an officiating standpoint. Duke I guaranteed 100%. Duke would not have won that game, Larry. I mean, it just seems to happen all the time with Mike Krzyzewski. Not to say he's not a wonderful coach, not to say he doesn't have great players, but Duke did not deserve to win that game.
And it's very coincidental that the day after that all that takes place, and Twitter blew up. I think I saw 700 or 800 responses, and I looked through CBS Sports, I looked through Duke, I looked through NCAA basketball. Everybody that was watching that game realizes that it was basically that Duke was given an advantage by the officials. So Michael Avenatti gets taken down today for trying to swindle Nike out of $25 million. Do you think the program that he was going to out was Duke, Larry?
I can't answer that. I have no clue about it. And moving back a little bit, backing up a little bit, I didn't see that play. So that it was a block charge.
Basically,
and they called the block.
Yeah, basically what happened, to describe it in the best way I can, is Zion has the ball. He pushes off with his arm, clearly, Larry, clearly an offensive foul. He's going to the basket, and then UCF's best player,
who has 4 fouls at the time,
gets called with a block, and I'm not even sure it was a block.
And it's an and one.
Yeah.
And Zion, so they're down by 1. Zion shoots a free throw, misses it. R.J. Barrett, so Delorier basically wraps up the guy he's on with an arm bar. R.J. Barrett literally pushes the guy in front of him in the back.
To get the rebound,
Gets the rebound, scores 2 points, and then obviously and Trey Jones fouled on the missed layup as well, but then obviously they didn't make their layups.
Yeah.
But Zion Williamson knocked over a 6'2", 180-pound point guard in B.J. Taylor.
Yeah.
Clearly just knocked
and the refs,
away.
And the refs don't call it. Yeah. They didn't
Why
call
didn't they call a double foul?
I think somebody would have gotten a double technical. Yeah, that wouldn't have been good.
Well, and guys, Mike's a good friend of mine, and it's in everything. It's in horse racing, which I love. Bob Baffert gets the benefit if there's should there be a disqualification. They usually lean towards him. I mean, Mike has earned his stripes.
Clearly.
But really, it isn't about Mike or Tom Izzo, who are both great friends again. It's about the players and what's fair for the players. If and it's part of the game. I mean, it's not perfect. Officiating is never perfect. But it's too bad that an official determines who moves on to the Sweet 16.
Coach, you had the opportunity to coach an undersized, really great college player, of course, in Marcus Fizer there at Iowa State. I wanted to get your thoughts on Zion Williamson and what his potential could be. And look, we've already seen what he's been able to do in college, but what do you think about his NBA potential and what he could actually transpire as a player once he gets to that level?
He's phenomenal talent, okay? But what's in between his ears is what I can't. You can't if you could put a machine on his heart and it could tell you how much heart he has, then you would know. But it's obviously he's tremendous talent. But we've seen tremendous talent that doesn't quite meet expectations because the game isn't important to him. They can't really play through adversity. They're not overly tough mentally, and so I don't know what he has in the tank from that angle.
We just had.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes complete sense. If you're just joining us, former National Coach of the Year, one of the top 60 winningest D1 coaches of all time, Larry Eustachy, joining us. We just had a caller who wanted to ask you, who is the best offense you ever had to coach against? Best coach offense you ever had to coach against?
Probably John Calipari. Well, but it wasn't his offense; it was Derrick Rose. John's offenses are always great, because he has these guys in the right spots, and they're all monsters. But he, and then when I think about it, we played Princeton one time, and the Princeton offense, as you all know, is extremely hard to guard. You have to guard for long periods of time, and you make a mistake, and you get back cut, and you lay it up. So coaches that use that as an offense were extremely hard to play against. Tark's, when I played against Tark, I mean, the pace they played at was so fast for so long, both offensively and defensively. he'd be right there,
right.
if not him. I mean, to guard, again, he had Larry Johnson. We played them in the Sweet 16 and lost them when I was assistant at Ball State. But, everybody thought Tark just rolled the ball out and had the best players. He was a tremendous coach. And they ran the lanes. They played fast when they didn't have something in transition. They moved the ball around. They didn't take a ton of contested shots. Thinking back, I'll take it back. I'd say Jerry Tarkanian.
Very good. You mentioned taking the basketball and just rolling it out there, letting the guys play. I think that was our last UNLV coach. Oh wait, did I say that out loud? I'm sorry. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk. Let's talk a little UNLV hoops. Though
No, that's when I was the PE coach at Gary High School in Pomona.
You just threw it out there.
I used to that was me. I would roll the ball out and read the racing form.
I'll tell you, that's awesome.
Playing the ponies. That's what
right.
I like to hear.
Larry was a semi-professional horse bettor.
I could see that.
Yeah. He knows what he's doing. So when he comes to Vegas, I got to get some of those tips. Speaking of tips, Larry, okay, you faced UNLV. You're friends with the Tarkanians. Danny Tarkanian comes on all the time. He loves you. A lot of fans here at UNLV certainly respect you when it comes to your opinion on UNLV basketball. This is a debacle right now. I think anyone would admit that. This is not a good situation. When you coached at Colorado State, you saw the fans. There was nobody at the Thomas and Mack Center, and it got worse year after year under Marvin Menzies. Not saying it's all his fault. But what do you make of this situation now at UNLV, where we are now 10, 11 days into it without a head coach after firing Marvin Menzies? And, I mean, what do you make of this whole situation? I know that's kind of a loaded question.
Well, when I first got to Colorado State, and David Rice was there were nice crowds. So I remember that.
They also had a McDonald's All-Americans back then.
Yes, and they were very hard to beat. And, I thought David got a raw deal. Very good friend of mine, but just, being neutral and looking at it, I don't know why that happened. I never know why you fire a coach unless you have a coach ready to come in. I never get that. If I'm reading in between the lines that I think UNLV, fired Marvin Menzies and they thought they had a guy to step in within a day or so, and something must have gone wrong. And then you go to your backup plan, and unless you have something concrete in writing, things can change. Look at Mick Cronin.
Right.
I mean, it's look at Beard. It really changed there. So nothing's perfect, and you run the risk. I've always thought that when you make a change, you better have the person that you want to replace that person right then and there. And there's a lot of athletic directors that are brilliant at it. They have a short list. They know who they want to go after. They trust the people they want to go after. So I bet the athletic director at UNLV thought that they had the perfect roadmap, and things change. And I understand it. I mean, you rely on the word of other people, and sometimes that word isn't always truthful.
All right, so Larry, the Sweet 16 as it is right now, give me the team that you think can beat anybody besides Duke, besides Virginia.
Besides who?
Yeah, right. Besides the number one seeds, we're talking a relatively unheralded team, like a sleeper, if you will.
Well, Tennessee's not a sleeper, but Tennessee's maybe the best coached team I've seen this year. And that's quite interesting when you look at, Rick and I go way back to the Big 12. Rick had all these 5-stars and had trouble handling them. He went to Tennessee and said, I'm not taking a 5-star. I'm going to take these blue-collar guys, and I'm going to go back to being direct. Then we get back to being a direct coach. I'm going to tell them how it is. I'm going to tell them what I expect. And he's got a special team, so I know he's, a 2 seed? So, but I think
Tennessee's 2 seed.
I think Tennessee is not a dark horse. I think they're definitely one of the favorites. I think Kelvin Sampson is doing a terrific job. There's not a better coach in the country than Kelvin Sampson. But I have seen Virginia when I was consulting/advising Villanova. They scrimmaged them. Villanova scrimmaged Virginia at Villanova, and I can't get over, how hard it would be to beat a Virginia team. I say that they lost to a 16 for the first time in history last year, but boy, are they in the right spots, and boy, are they hard to beat.
Coach, I'll bounce a question off you that I asked former UNLV running Rebel Anthony Marshall last week that we asked on the show with respect to the Rebels. Now, you, of course, coached against this team. There was a lot of unrealistic expectations with the fans here with respect to, they had a national championship 30 years ago, so maybe they can get back to there. What is your perception of what should be success here at UNLV in 2019 and then moving forward here for the next couple of years? Where do they need to be, both in the conference and from a national perspective?
Oh, I still think it's definitely a top 25, 30 job. Mm-hmm. Brian, you and I have talked about it off the air that we've got the football team coming in and we got hockey, but I saw that happen when I was in Utah when the Jazz came in. And it took a little bit away from when I was assistant at University of Utah, but not much. Yeah. And I think I don't understand why they don't go after Bo Ryan. I mean, I think Bo Ryan would be there's not a better coach. Mm-hmm. He obviously can recruit. Mike Davis brings his son with him. He's a great coach. But I think I've never thought the universities were the biggest part of it. I always thought the coach was. I always thought if you put John Calipari anywhere, he will win.
I agree.
And he does it the right way, and people don't get that.
And you mentioned, go ahead, Coach. I'm sorry.
Well, going back to UNLV, I mean, I think it's a monster job. Mm-hmm. I really do. And you don't have to win the press conference. You just have to get the right coach. I mean, you didn't win the press conference, I don't think, when Beard got it. Mm-hmm. And I think there would be a whole different story right now.
Absolutely. No question. It's funny you mentioned Bo Ryan, and I agree with you. I think he would be a fantastic fit here. Another name that's popped up, of course, is Mike Miller. He'd bring along his brother Ryan Miller. They would recruit their asses off. But the word I get, from people that I know, and they all seem to be telling me the same thing, that Francois is set on a mid-major coach. Now, I don't think Rhodes is going to take it. I know that Oates said that that's not going to work out. It seems like it's a domino effect. They keep asking all these coaches, and it's not working out. Now, I don't know who they're talking to right now, but if you get, for example, the Irvine coach, right? You get a guy like that in here. I think you get a guy like a Mike Miller or a Bo Ryan. I think that's a much better choice. But from what I've heard, they have not reached out to the Millers, which I find fascinating.
Well, here's where a coach makes his bones in coaching and gets the respect of the other coaches around him, which is what a coach coaches for. He wants respect from within the coaching fraternity. And the biggest jump in all of coaching basketball is going mid-major to high major. And how many guys have failed? How many?
That's a good point.
You can. Tim Floyd was one that did not. He jumped from New Orleans to Iowa State and was highly successful. You go to these great coaches that are the great coaches have made most of them, besides Roy Williams, who obviously his first job was Kansas. But you look at these coaches like Rick Barnes, and they've made that jump. And I don't know the stats, but I bet 80+% have failed. And so if you're, as our friend JD is, you believe on analytics, it's a big risk. It's a big risk. Whether it's Mike Miller, but some of those guys everybody laughed at Pat Riley. I mean, there are differences to my opinion. There are things where it has worked out with that kind of move, but when you can get somebody who's proven at the high major level, those guys are priceless.
No doubt.
You can't get them these days because you go after Kelvin Sampson, who's probably making close to $2 million, and you try to get him, and they pay him $3 million, and they stay. You go after Dana Altman, and all of a sudden, look what he just signed for. He was making right around 2.2, 2.5. They just signed him to $3.5 million, all guaranteed for 7 years.
Right.
So it's hard to get the proven commodity.
I agree.
So
but
any other way, there's risk involved. There's no risk involved if you go after a Lon Kruger.
Sure.
For example. Because keep in mind, UNLV is not a mid-major. It's a high major.
Yeah.
It's a high major.
And a fairly easy place to recruit if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And now if you're talking about, Wyoming, mid-major, Colorado State, mid-major, Boise State, mid-major, but the one high major out of all the teams in the Mountain West is UNLV, and Eric Musselman's making a great case that Nevada's right around the corner from a high major.
Yeah, no doubt. I know you're friends with Muss. Boy, has he done a phenomenal job turning that program around. Well, Coach, listen, next time you come out to Vegas, I want some tips on betting the ponies. I expect that from you, no question. And maybe a few basketball tips as well, because I've heard you know a thing or two about college basketball. But all seriousness, really appreciate you coming on the show. Look forward to having you on again soon. And thank you so much for taking the time, Larry. Really appreciate it.
Send me that first. You guys send me that 90 minutes because I love to listen to you.
I appreciate that.
I really believe, Brian, I've told you this, that you could out-debate Bill Clinton, which is saying something. Bill Clinton,
I appreciate that.
Maybe the best debater I've ever seen. The quickest guy on his feet, gets impeached and gets his way out of it. I think you'd have a problem if you went against Brian.
I appreciate those kind remarks, Coach. I mean, I was told in another lifetime I should have been an attorney, but I'm just a radio guy. Coach, thank you so much again, man. I appreciate it, Larry.
Larry.
Thanks, Coach.
Larry. Talk soon. I'm going to call him the great one, not Mark Levin. I'm talking about Larry Eustachy. Thanks, everyone, for all the phone calls and everything, and I will send Larry the first 90 minutes of the show. Catch you tomorrow, folks. Have a great one. Chris Wynn, thanks for coming in. Ken Thompson, the legend, coming up next. You've been listening to The Vegas Take on the all-new 101.5 FM, 720 AM KDWN.